So we bring you this next story from our new raid-proof bunker at our undisclosed location at the RMI TV studios in the heart of the CBD. Now, we at The Leak have recently gone into hiding because of this week's unprecedented raids on journalists.
Now, journalists, MPs and whistleblowers face possible jail time in an increasingly bitter battle over press freedom in Australia.
Scary. I mean, not that we consider ourselves actual journalists here at The Leak, but as the acting AFP commissioner said,
no sector of the community should be immune for this type of activity.
And federal raids have even targeted the home of News Corp journalist Annika Smethurst. There she is. And we would also hardly call most of what News Corp does journalism, so we feel like we are running a risk. In a statement, the BBC said this police raid against our partners at ABC is an attack on press freedom, which we at the BBC find deeply troubling. And we all know that deeply troubling is British slang for fucking horrifying. It just doesn't carry as well in the BBC's received pronunciation. So how does Monster for Home Affairs Peter Dutton feel on the matter?
The Federal Police have an obligation to investigate that matter if it's been referred to them, and they've got equally an obligation under law to conduct their inquiries independently. Nobody would accept...
Oh, sorry, cut you off there, Dutton. You were defending horrors.
Nobody would accept me as Minister or Elbow as Minister directing how an investigation should take place or who should be raided or who should be subject to inquiry.
And Peter Dutton's right, of course. We wouldn't want anyone free to abuse a position of power.
For more than a week, Peter Dutton's been fending off claims he misused ministerial powers in saving 2 European nannies from deportation.
But I mean, that reporter was fine, right? Yeah, he was fine. I mean, you know, obviously didn't keep his job, but at least he wasn't fired. He simply didn't have his contract renewed. I mean, it could happen to anyone. And anyway, that was years ago. We now have a fancy new set of whistleblower laws, so we're probably fine. Maybe. Possibly. Except for all the raids. Yeah, okay, we're probably screwed. Joining us here in the bunker and here to explain how we got into this mess in the first place, we've got our residential law expert now, Justice Vidya Rajan.
Hello, Rose. Yes, it is I, Justice Rajan, gavel, gavel, etc.
So, Justice Rajan, you specialise in constitutional law. That sounds important. How did you get into that?
Yes, correct. I am important. See, Rose, it all began when I got a half-decent mark on the first half of a constitutional law exam during my half-finished law degree. From then on, there was really no stopping me. I went on to watch The Castle not once or twice, but 3 times. And also, I bought this wig.
It's a very impressive wig. It does make me immediately trust what you're going to say. So tell us, why is Australia so bad at free speech? It's like the law hates us.
Yes, Rose, that's because it does. More specifically, the Constitution hates you. The Constitution was made by a bunch of dudes around Federation, and in classic Australian fashion, you could say that the key feature of the Australian Constitution is how much it doesn't like to actually spell out or commit to or decisively include things. As a document, it's basically a giant yeah, nah, yeah, maybe.
I mean, that is our national motto, I guess.
The upshot of that, though, is that stuff like freedom from racial discrimination, freedom of movement, only courts being able to hand down criminal sentences, and of course the right to free speech, aren't actually expressed in the document. They have to be implied in.
Okay. So the Australian Constitution is basically like my Uncle Steve, who always leaves it up to my Aunt Ethel to somehow read between the lines of his grunts and work out what he actually wants. Their marriage is terrible.
Pretty much. And all that implication has been up to the court so far. Look, what courts have had to do basically is look at the structure of the Constitution and say things like, well, it definitely says we need to have elections, but if we need to have elections, that means people need to be able to freely talk about politics and their opinions about politics, even One Nation voters. So in that way, it's implied that the Constitution is saying it wants us to talk about things freely. So it's kind of like having a right to free speech, except not actually.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that the Constitution's a bloke who can't communicate and needs to start going to men's shed. I'm starting to see the problem.
Yep, and just like blokes not expressing things and keeping them to themselves, the lack of express rights in our Constitution is threatening the peaceful fabric of our everyday lives.
I mean, this sounds like a systemic problem. It's very hard to solve.
It is. See, when you have to imply rights into a document, it makes those rights pretty shady and limited because they're always dependent on our understanding of other bits of the document. To get any clarity, Usually, people have to take a case before the court, and that's a lengthy process and also one that's open to a lot of changing interpretation. Meanwhile, the government can just keep passing harmful laws.
And I mean, that's what's happened here, right? Like over the last few years, the federal government's passed several bits of legislation that increase their powers to investigate and tamper with journalists and their sources in the name of national security. I mean, would that have been possible if we had an express right to free speech?
It would have been a lot harder and attracted immediate scrutiny and challenge. But now, seeing as there isn't such a right, we're probably going to have to wait for the courts to say if these actions are legal or not. Meanwhile, fucking shit can happen.
That's true. So a Bill of Rights is kind of like a preventative health measure, like a condom, or the Medicare therapy sessions that we wish Uncle Steve had accessed before his meltdown. Aunt Ethel is very tired.
Exactly, Rose. And if we don't want to be Aunt Ethel, God rest her soul.
I mean, she's not actually dead, maybe emotionally, but not.
Yes, R.I.P. Aunt Ethel. We need to seriously start looking at agitating for a Bill of Rights.
AFP!
Yep.
Oh, God,
Oh, no.
I forgot these two work for the federal
Oh,
police.
gavel, gavel, gavel!
My God.
I knew there was a leak.
It's just the name, Scoot.
Yeah.
Look, it looks like they found us. We're going to have to cut this short. We're being arrested. Look, please thank all my guests and join us again next week, assuming they let us come back for another episode of The Leap.